Really like to welcome everyone to the BMA's Making It in Medicine, Insights into Studying and Working in the Medical Field event that we're holding as part of our Black History Month. I'm Tinaye Mapako. I'm the BMA's Medical Students Committee co-chair. So that means I help represent all of the medical students all up and down the UK, which is really exciting. I'm a final year medical student at the University of Liverpool. And we're just really excited for this event. This is something I really wanted when I was applying for medical school. And we have some amazing presentations from an excellent panelists. To start off, we have Dr. Helena McCowan, who's the chair of our representative body at the BMA. So it means that she helps organize our trade union. So you're going to see a short video now from Helena.
Hello everyone, and welcome to Making It in Medicine, Insights into Studying and Working in the Medical Field. My name is Dr. Helena McCowan, and I am the BMA Representative Body Chair at the British Medical Association. The British Medical Association, or BMA for short, is a trade union and professional body for doctors and medical students in the UK. We are committed to widening participation into medicine and ensuring that all students who are interested in entering the medical field have a fair opportunity to do so. Our widening participation work, including holding schools events such as this, and also the Aspiring Doctors programme, which uses our network of doctors and medical students to help those interested in applying to medical school. We believe that it is important to help bridge the gap in knowledge and access so that medicine is a career option for anyone who wishes to become a doctor, regardless of their social or economic background. In light of the COVID-19 pandemic and the great impact it has and will continue to have on pupils' ability to access a career in medicine, we have organised today's virtual panel discussion as part of Black History Month. You will hear from 3 brilliant panellists today, who are all at different stages of their medical career. Your first panellist is Malone Mukwende, who is a third-year medical student currently studying at St George's University of London. He is also the co-author of Mind the Gap, which is a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms in black and brown skin that has revolutionised the healthcare sector and highlighted the need for increased representation in medical imagery. We are also joined by Dr. Leanne Armitage. Leanne grew up in a single-parent home on a council estate in Peckham. Despite having no medics in her family or social network, she decided to research the necessary steps and work towards becoming a doctor. Although Leanne was rejected on first applying to medical school, she took a gap year and reapplied, securing 3 offers and going on to study at St George's University of London. At medical school, Leanne founded the Armitage Foundation, which aims to increase diversity across UK medical schools by offering an outreach programme to students from underrepresented backgrounds. Leanne was awarded the UK 2018 Queen's Young Leaders Award by Her Majesty the Queen at Buckingham Palace and is now a recently qualified doctor. Our final panellist is Dr. Vongai Mugadza, NHS GP and founder of Experience Medicine. This organisation aims to improve medical work experience accessibility through innovative approaches, including virtual work experience opportunities, workshops and connecting students with medical institutions. Her work has been essential during the COVID-19 period, where face-to-face work experience has been cancelled. Vongai also partners with the Royal College of General Practitioners to facilitate a work experience widening participation programme for aspiring medics, as well as launching a longitudinal programme to support Black aspiring medical students. There will also be time for us to hear from you all through the pre-submitted questions to our panellists. Thank you all for joining us this morning. I hope that you not only find the discussion interesting, but this may be the beginning of your very own journey into medicine. Thank you and good luck.
Oh, wonderful. That was a lovely message from Dr. McKeon. Without further ado, I'm going to introduce Malone Mukwende. He's a third-year medical student, and honestly, he's someone I find so inspiring. Over the past couple of months, seeing his work with Mind the Gap has been illuminating for so many Black medics, seeing what representation really means. He's a medic at St. George's University of London, and his work has been revolutionizing the importance of increased representation in medical imagery. Since his book was released in August, the work has been viewed over 40,000 times and read in 103 countries. Here's Malone.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for the introduction. It makes me laugh every time. I'm just going to share the next 15 minutes with you guys, talking a little bit about my journey to medicine and talking about some of the work that I've been doing with Mind the Gap. And at the end, there will be time for questions, which may get answered, but hopefully I can answer some of them in my talk. Next slide, please. So I always start my presentations off with this slide, just to kind of give you a picture of the person who I am, because I think it's so important to appreciate that before med school, before Mind the Gap, I was Malone, and I still am Malone, and I always will be Malone. The picture on the left is an Arsenal player, because I'm an Arsenal fan, and that's often my posture when I'm very confused about things. In the top right is baby Malone, to kind of appreciate where I came from. The middle picture in this row of three, if you can see, there is 3 Malones, and that's because I'm very into like visual arts, and that was me playing around with Photoshop during lockdown. And then the bottom right picture is me in Barcelona when we were still allowed to travel the world. Next slide, please. So my journey to medicine kind of looked like this, and I know this journey might be a bit confusing because, as you heard, I go to St. George's University of London. So at A-level, I studied maths, biology, and chemistry. I managed to pass those A-levels and get 3 A's. During the interview process for medicine, I actually applied to these 4 universities, which you can see, so Birmingham, Oxford, Leicester, and Nottingham. And I also applied to Birmingham as well for my 5th choice, which is a backup option which you can have, which I applied for pharmacy. I actually got rejections from all of these universities, and I only managed to make it to the interview stage for University of Leicester. Unfortunately, even after interview stage, I still got rejected from Leicester. And I always like to talk about this experience because it's just to illustrate how getting into medicine is not always like, there's not always one way. And as you can see, at almost like my first attempt, I got rejected from every single university I applied to, which of course is very disheartening at the time. But when you know why you want to do something, you'll keep going regardless. Next slide, please. So I ended up getting into St. George's University of London through clearing. This is another option, another route of how to get into medicine. I'm not sure, because of COVID and everything that happened this year with exams, if clearing will still be as popular in the future as it was when I applied. But essentially what happened, my application process for clearing, I phoned up St. George's on the day after my A-level results and told them my situation, that I've got the grades, I have the necessary UCAT score to come and study at St. George's. Do you have any places? Funnily enough, they told me they do, but they only had 1 more interview slot. And given that I wasn't from London, I had to travel to London to come and do the interview. And on my way to this interview, I ended up being 45 minutes late to the last interview of the day. So I ended up thinking that there is no way they're going to let me in, because for professionalism, for starters, I'm already 45 minutes late to a medicine interview. But luckily, I just gave it my all in the interview, and I ended up managing to get a space through clearing, which was, I look back at that moment and just thank God that I managed to make it through there, because at the time I was feeling really low, because I had the grades, but it felt like I wasn't going to be doing anything for the next year. However, this is one of the many different routes to get into medicine, which I have explored, and I'm more than happy to talk to people further about it. Next slide, please. So while I'm at St. George's, I wanted to kind of give you an insight into what the average week looks like. So this was actually last week, what my timetable for last week was like. I'm a third year medical student, so for first years, it isn't necessarily the same. But this is kind of how university is different to school. Whereas at school, you start at 9 most days and finish around 3. At university, the time that you start and the time that you finish doesn't really have a starting time and an end time. It can be anywhere between 9 and 5 p.m. Sometimes if you're doing extra revision, it can even be after that or it can even be before that. So at medical school, we tend to have a Monday to Friday of lectures and different sessions, such as on Wednesdays, we have clinical communication sessions. And then on Friday mornings and Monday mornings, we have problem-based learning, where we essentially look at a case and go through a case and how we can identify some of the problems and try to work it out from a diagnosis all the way to how we're going to manage the patient, which is quite interesting. And it's something that I really enjoy because it gets you to think on your toes. A lot of the time without these sessions, I feel like we'll be being spoon-fed information. And that's another difference between how school and university work. A lot of this content, which is on this page, you have to actively go out and do all of the work by yourself because nobody's going to spoon-feed you or no one's going to help you if you don't help yourself first. Next slide, please. So this is almost an intro into some of the work that I've been doing related with Mind the Gap. This is a official government piece of advice which was posted out during the coronavirus pandemic. And this is from the Royal College of Pediatrics. And as you can see on the 4th point down, one of the points for a red warning flag is if the baby is going blue around the lips. And of course, this is, for some people, this makes a lot of sense and it applies. However, one thing that I found from reading this information is that it's not necessarily inclusive of all groups of the population. And especially in the coronavirus pandemic, where we found patients from a BAME background were dying at higher rates than everybody else, I just thought that potentially one of the reasons that we haven't explored is that the advice and the information that is being given out to protect people isn't necessarily protecting everyone. And those who are unfortunate are dying as a result of lack of advice. So that's where some of the work that I've been doing started to creep in. Next slide, please. This page, I know to many of you sitting at home, it probably doesn't look like it makes any sense, but this is actually, like, take my word for it, this is analysis of the NHS conditions website, which is a website where if you type in anything, like if you've got a sore throat this morning and you type in on Google sore throat NHS, it will take you to an NHS conditions website, and it will often tell you like what the symptoms are, what to do. Should you call your GP? Should you go to the hospital? Should you call NHS 111? A member of staff in the NHS carried out this analysis of the entire website, and he found that out of 1,007 conditions, not a single condition on this website featured an image of darker skin. At the time of carrying out that research, that was. Last week, I found out that there is now an image of darker skin on the meningitis page on the NHS website, which came from Mind the Gap. So it's positive to see with how Mind the Gap is already starting to revolutionize how the NHS UK is starting to reform its website as a result. And I think it's so important to have things like that, because the way some of the conditions are structured on the NHS website, it almost assumes that the person reading or the person who is ill is from a white background. And if you're not fitting into that category, sometimes you may think, oh, okay, I'm all right, I don't need to worry about it, when really and truly your symptoms are just as severe and they can even get more complicated and end up being diagnosed a lot later. Next slide, please. So what exactly is Mind the Gap for those of you who may still be confused? Mind the Gap is a clinical handbook of signs and symptoms in Black and brown skin. My inspiration from the work came from a whole host of life events, just being able to see that people in my community were not necessarily always receiving the best care, people in my community not necessarily always believing that they will receive the best care, and having major distrust with the healthcare service, both in the UK, in the US, just all over the world. And I never understood why this was a common theme. My work aims to address the lack of teaching on darker skin. Funnily enough, at medical school, I showed you my timetable of all of those lectures that we had last week. At the moment, it's not related, but say if we were doing something related to the skin, I could almost 9 times out of 10 tell you that there won't be a single image of darker skin in our lectures prior to this year. Now we've started to see a change. Lecturers are more actively putting these images into their lectures, because it is clear when they put the images there that we need to know both, because sometimes they can be so radically different. And I believe that this is so important because medical care shouldn't be compromised because of the color of your skin. As doctors, we're always told to act in the patient's best interests. And I feel like if we are not even acknowledging that there is differences in skin color, then we're not always necessarily acting in the patient's best interest. And it's so important for future doctors, which are you guys watching at home, and for current doctors, such as some of the people on the panel, to be willing to unlearn some of the biases that they may have picked up in medical school subconsciously, because I believe a lot of these problems and a lot of these health inequalities that we see today, some of them would have manifested from the point of medical school. It's just that you didn't realize it at the time because you had no responsibility, but when the responsibility comes into your arms, these biases just go out and you're now taking them to a whole group of patients who don't deserve it. Next slide, please. So some of the journey behind Mind the Gap thus far, we started last year before COVID-19. COVID-19 came as a serious spanner in the works because everything just closed down midway through our project. However, we were so determined for change that we couldn't let that stop the project. I posted the post about Mind the Gap on my social media in June 2020. And since then, I estimate that it's been seen over 300 million times on social media. That is due to the fact that it's been featured in House of Lords, ITV, BBC, Sky News, BMJ. The list is there to read, and also featured by notable celebrities such as Chopra, Winnie Harlow, Lupita Nyong'o. And a lot of people often ask me, like, why now? Why did you start the work now? Why did you think you got the response that you got? I think one thing that's so important to appreciate is that these issues are not new. These issues did not arise in 2020. They've been prevalent for so many years. But I think one thing that has happened this year, I think going into lockdown gave people a time to reflect. It's almost as if while we were inside locked in our houses, you could open your curtains and see what the world is actually like. And when we metaphorically opened these curtains, we were able to see a lot of the cracks and a lot of the problems which are out there in the world. Hence, when the world slowly started to reopen again, people were now more receptive for change. I hope that organizations continue to be receptive for this change because it's very much needed. And I think from the response alone is just a testimony to how much it's needed. Next slide, please. So I'm just going to finish off on this slide of personal advice, which I always give, and just some of the lessons that I've learned along my journey of some rejections, along my journey of Mind the Gap. I think it's so important to start where you are. A lot of the time we look at different people in different positions. I don't know, you may look at me and be like, oh, well, he was only able to do X, Y, Z because he's at medical school. And I think if you approach things with that mentality, you will never get started yourself, because you'll always look at someone else and think they've run their race further. So it's just important to start with what you've got, whether that be you're in year 11 and you just want to find out more about what the career of medicine is like. Just start there. Don't overcomplicate things. I think it's so important to realize your worth as well. You are all smart kids. You are all people who are very bright, and you all have the power to change the world. I think the youth is literally everything you can think about in this world that we use today. It probably came from somebody who was young, and it's so inspiring to see young people be able to make so many changes. So it's important to not look down upon yourself and say, oh, well, I'm too young to do this, or what do I know? I'm still a newbie. realize your worth because you hold a lot of value in these situations. That ties in nicely to being never too small to make a change. Literally, one thing I always say to people is that I approach life with the attitude of how can I become 1% better every day? Because I think sometimes we look at change and be like, oh, I want to move a mountain and think that we have to move a mountain today. Whereas if you take it stone by stone, before you know it, you would have moved a mountain, and you don't necessarily have to put in a lot of effort to do it stone by stone in the long term. And be fearless. I think this is probably, if there's a take home that I would love for you to take home, it's being fearless. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. I think when you start to get comfortable with things, you start to get complacent. You start to let almost life pass you by, and you don't shoot your biggest shots or achieve your wildest dreams because you're just comfortable in the space that you are. And I think that's very confining sometimes. So being fearless allows you to step out of this zone. It is going to be hard. I'm not going to act like, oh, being fearless is the easiest thing ever. It is going to be hard, but I think when you're uncomfortable, that's where you see the most growth, because life just forces you to grow. Point number 5, it's so important to learn from your mistakes. I learned from the rejections that I got, and almost use those rejections and those mistakes that I made to redirect me. Without those, I don't think I possibly could have ended up getting to where I've got to today in medical school and with Mind the Gap. Literally learn from your mistakes, learn from the mistakes of others as well, especially with the rise of social media and all these podcasts and everything. A lot of the people that you look up to probably have content of some sort on the internet. So sometimes listen to their mistakes, see what they did wrong, and see how you can almost learn from them as well. Point number 6 as well, write things down. With the way social media works, yet again, with the way you're at school, there's 101 thoughts that come into your head every single day and just leave your head straight away. Sometimes some of these ideas could be Nobel Peace Prize winning ideas. They could literally change the world. But because you didn't write it down and you let it go in and out of your head, it almost has no value. When you start to write things down, you can start to visualize, oh, okay, maybe I have this idea to do this. Now you almost give yourself some sort of accountability and allow it to manifest and allow it to grow and allow it to develop. And when I say write things down, I literally have a notepad and I write down the craziest ideas that I get. 9 times out of 10, these ideas, I may never do anything with them again, but who knows, some of those ideas may change the world one day. So if I don't have any accountability to my own ideas, then I won't be able to do anything with them. And on that note, thank you very much. I think I managed to do that in exactly 15 minutes. But thank you very much for watching my presentation today.
Wow, thank you so much, Malone. I really, really enjoyed that so much. And I just learned, it's just really heartening to see. And I just think the most important takeaway is that the reason we want you and everyone to have a chances in medicine is that when we have people who come from different backgrounds and different places, we get things like Mind the Gap. We get people changing things and doing great things. And this moves perfectly on to Leanne, who's another person I was inspired by. I think I saw her on TV when she first set up her charity. As Dr. McCann was saying, you know, Leanne grew up in a single parent home in a council estate in Peckham. She witnessed street violence, and that's when she decided she wanted to become a surgeon. She didn't have any medics in her family or any sort of social network, but she took the steps needed in order to try and access this career. In year 11, she was appointed head girl of her school in St. Martin in the Fields. She achieved great GCSEs, and then she achieved a bursary from A Better Chance from Mill Hill School, where she boarded at sixth form. And when she first applied to medical school, she was rejected. And then she took a gap year. And after that, she secured 3 offers and decided to also study at St. George's. During this year, she was also awarded a Southwark scholarship. Well, you can tell I'm not from London, which helped fund her medical degree. After a second year of medical school, she became frustrated with the lack of diversity across UK medical schools. She was one of the very few students from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, working class backgrounds. and she decided to co-fund a charity, the Armitage Foundation, with Daniel Huff. The Armitage Foundation offers a medical outreach program to students from underrepresented backgrounds with the aim of increasing diversity across UK medical schools. And as a result of this work that Leanne has been doing for the Armitage Foundation, she was awarded the UK 2018 Queen's Young Leader Award by Her Majesty in Buckingham Palace. Leanne is now a qualified doctor. So over to Leanne.
Hi everybody, hello. First of all, I just want to thank you, Tinaye, for the introduction. Thank you to the British Medical Association for giving me the opportunity to speak to all these wonderful students. I wish I could see you. Malone, you did a wonderful presentation. I'm definitely going to start writing down my ideas in a notepad, so thank you for that. Now, the title of my presentation today is called The Power of a Dream. And I'm going to talk about how my dream of becoming a doctor allowed me to overcome a number of challenges to stand as the doctor that I stand as today. I'm also going to talk to you about my charity, the Armitage Foundation, which, as was already said, is a charity I co-founded to increase diversity across medical schools, because at present there's a massive lack of diversity. Half of the schools across the UK do not produce a single medical applicant, so it really is an issue that needs to be addressed for a number of reasons. But the reason I primarily like to state is that, you know, the population that doctors serve is a diverse population. And so you need to have a diverse board of doctors who are able to effectively serve the needs of this population. So that really is my driving force, to see an NHS that better reflects the diverse society that it serves. So if we could have the next slide, please. Okay, so whenever I do presentations about my journey, I always like to show this picture. This is a picture of me when I was 15 years old, and this is essentially the age when my vision for life was born. And there is a backstory behind this. I was coming home one day with my sister, and I remember hearing the propellers of a helicopter from above. And anybody who knows me knows I absolutely love helicopters. So I got super excited, and I managed to convince my sister to follow me to where the helicopter was landing. And it was landing on a huge grass field in the middle of a big estate close to where I live. And when we got to the scene, I remember seeing a crowd of people gathered around, and everybody was just staring, you know, and the expression on their faces didn't quite match the excitement that I felt inside. So I remember turning to one of the ladies in the crowd, and I asked, you know, why is everybody here? Like, what's happened? And in that moment, the response she gave me drained all excitement from me, because she told me a young man had been stabbed. And growing up in Peckham, it wasn't uncommon, sadly, to hear of young men being shot or being stabbed. But there was something about this particular incident that really hit me hard. And I think it was because I went from that emotional extreme of being super excited to being like, oh my God, you know, this helicopter hasn't landed for a good reason, nothing to be excited about. So that evening, I remember going home with quite a heavy heart, and I remember just meditating and praying and thinking, what can I do to make a difference? You know, everybody in that crowd was just standing and staring, but who was going to make a difference? What can I do to make a difference? And after some deep thought, I decided that if I aspired to become a trauma surgeon, that would give me a platform to go into environments where young men are victims of knife and gun crime and inspire them to be and to do better. So that is essentially how my vision for becoming a doctor was born. However, there were several challenges that I would need to overcome. Could we have the next slide, please? So the first challenge, if that could pop up. Next, please. Yeah, so the first challenge is I grew up in a single parent home on a council estate. In fact, I only met my father for the first time when I was 19 years old. So I didn't have a father figure growing up, which of course was a challenge. Next point, please. I came from a family of zero medics. My mother had a basic education. She didn't understand how to navigate the higher education system. So, you know, going to university wasn't really the culture in my family. Next point, please. Only one other of my siblings went to university, so they couldn't really advise me. She didn't study medicine either, so I didn't really have any kind of specific mentors that could help me. Next point, please. I had my own self-doubt and the doubts of others close to me that I needed to contend with, which was very challenging, because I always make the point that, you know, even if other people do believe in you, if you are struggling to believe in yourself, it can be very difficult for you to make strides towards achieving whatever dream you have, because ultimately you are the person that needs to put in the work. You know, if you're aspiring to become a doctor, you need to revise, you need to show up to interviews, you need to get that work experience. And so it's really important that you develop a system whereby you can help yourself to increase your confidence. For me personally, what that would look like is I would have posters around my wall, or just positive words of affirmation that I would stick up. I would listen to motivational messages. I would listen to the reasons why I could do and achieve my dream, as opposed to the reasons why I couldn't. And I found that really helpful for boosting my confidence, though it was a journey. Next slide, please. So there were negative voices that I also had to contend with. I remember someone close to me once saying that, Leanne, it doesn't matter how many A stars you get, when they see that you've got black in you, they will not let you become a doctor. And of course, you know, this is a completely shocking statement. It absolutely does not matter what background you come from in terms of your socioeconomic background, your cultural background, your ethnic heritage. If you want to become a doctor, you can make it happen. So never listen to anybody who tries to tell you different, especially for reasons like this. Next point, please. Somebody else said to me, Leanne, are you sure you want to be a doctor? I mean, it seems like you're finding maths quite difficult, and medicine is not easy. I'm sure you could do very well at something else. And I actually giggled, because as I was reading through the pre-submitted questions, somebody submitted a question, what do you do if you're finding maths difficult? So if you're watching this, I want to tell you that I share that challenge. I found maths quite difficult when I was studying A-level. And the point I want to make here, guys, is that I'm yet to meet or find any successful person who told me that their journey to success was a walk in the park. Everybody encounters challenges. And actually, when you encounter a challenge, so for me, like maths or whatever that challenge may be to you, your ability to stand against that challenge and to overcome that challenge in some senses is a testimony to, you know, the power of that dream for you. Because it's not going to be easy. There'll be challenges along the way, and you have to really persevere. And if you're truly passionate about something, you will have the strength to keep persevering, because you'll have your why at the forefront of your mind. And that is something I definitely used to do when I would encounter negative voices or challenges. I'd remind myself of why I want to become a doctor, that this vision is bigger than just me. You know, young men are dying in my neighborhood. That was what was in my mind. That was what was in my heart. So that was such a great driving force, no matter what challenge I encountered. And the challenges continued. We'll see as the presentation progresses. Next slide, please. There were positive voices. It wasn't all doom and gloom. Someone did say to me, it does not matter if you get D's in all of your A-levels, Leanne. It doesn't matter if you have to go the long way round. You will eventually become a doctor. And it's so important that you have these kind of people in your life who can really speak what I call life into your life. Because the person who said this to me, I knew she believed it with everything inside of her. And that was such a great source of consolation and encouragement for me to know that I can do this, you know? Next point, please. Another positive voice said, Leanne, I think you'll make a great doctor, and I'm not just saying that. And that was also really encouraging for me. Next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, I came from a family of zero medics. I didn't have anyone in my social network who I knew that was a doctor. So for me, the first thing I did to figure out what I need to do to make this become a reality is I just did a Google search. And when I did do a Google search, I realized the first thing I needed to do was get really good grades at GCSE. So I set myself the goal of achieving 10 A stars, which with the new grading system, I think is 10 grade 9s. And to my surprise, I got 10 A stars. And the reason I like to share this point is because it's so important that you set yourself goals, particularly challenging goals, because a goal gives you a benchmark to work towards. And even if you miss that, even if I didn't get 10 A stars, I probably still would have got pretty good GCSEs because I had a goal. And not only did I had a goal, I had a plan of how I can reach that goal, okay? So set goals. If I can tell you anything today, is set goals. Next point, please. Okay, so while I was at secondary school, my sister suggested that I apply for a bursary, as was already mentioned. And this was called the A Better Chance Bursary by Mill Hill School in North London. And it was a bursary specifically for a student who wants to study medicine. And a bursary is similar to like a scholarship, so it pays for your education. And to my surprise, I was awarded this. I was the first recipient of it. Next picture, please. While I was at sixth form, I got very involved. I was involved in cadets. Next image. I was involved in running. Next image, please. I got involved in the swim team. The reason I'm sharing all of this is because, you know, when you're applying to study medicine, they want to see that you're a well-rounded student. And so it's really important that you get involved in these other things because they give you transferable skills. You know, being a doctor is working as a team, so it's important that you try to engage in team sports or team activities so that you can develop these skills and these characteristics. So that's why I'm showing you all of these pictures. Next picture, please. So, of course, I studied really hard while I was at sixth form. Similar to Malone, I did biology, chemistry, and maths as well. Next image, please. I did all the work experience that I needed to do. So essentially, while I was at sixth form, I dedicated my whole life to my pursuit of wanting to become a doctor. I studied hard, I got involved in extracurricular activities. I did everything within my power to do. Next picture, please. And then I was rejected. And I literally felt like how I look in that image. I just felt so terrible because I was thinking, like, I've just put my all into this. I've done everything, you know, especially with the bursary as well. When I was at sixth form, I saw it as my 2-year mission to get into medical school. And I was the first recipient of this bursary. And although the school didn't put a lot of pressure on me, I guess I put pressure on myself. So I was really discouraged. But as I said at the beginning, you know, when you've got a why, when you are so passionate about something, you have to keep persevering past the challenges. And so I decided that, you know what, I'm going to take a gap here and reapply because there's nothing else that I want to do. I know I want to be a doctor. So that's what I did. Next slide, please. Okay, so what's happened since? So similar to Malone, I studied at St. George's. The picture that will come up next is me on my first day at medical school. So there's me outside of St. George's. Next picture, please. So when you're in medical school, you'll often get the opportunity to do what's called an intercalated degree. So that's taking a year out of medical school to study a degree, which could be a master's or a BSc, Bachelor of Science degree. And I did a degree in global health at King's College London. Next image, please. And during that same year, I co-founded, or I started the foundations for my charity, the Armitage Foundation, which I'm going to speak to you about on another slide. So we'll just breeze past it for now. Next image, please. As a result of the work I did through the foundation, as was mentioned, I got to meet Her Majesty the Queen to receive an award, which was so incredible. I think it was so amazing for me because I was just thinking, what are the chances of this, you know? With the background that I come from, meeting Her Majesty, the Queen, to receive an award. So again, I just want to inspire you all that it doesn't matter what background you come from, guys. If you pursue your dreams, you can do amazing things that you would have never even imagined possible, you know? So dream big. Next image, please. I got to meet Harry and Meghan. I thought I can't not put that image in. Next picture, please. I got to meet Theresa May when she was Prime Minister. Next image, please. I got a grant, actually, my first ever grant for the charity from Comic Relief while I was at medical school. And that allowed us to hire our first staff member. So while I was at medical school, I was a boss, you know. I love saying that. I think it sounds cool. Next image, please. And then I graduated in April this year is when we got our results, and I found out that I was a doctor. And I started working. I officially started work in the beginning of August, and I've got another slide on that, so I'll share that with you in a bit more detail soon. But let's go on to the next slide so I can talk about the charity. Okay, so the Armitage Foundation. So as I've mentioned, We exist to increase diversity. It's really important that the medical workforce is diverse, okay? When you have doctors that are coming from various backgrounds, they will consider different things. For example, Malone, because of the background he comes from, he thought more about the importance of, you know, when teachers in medical school or doctors in general, they should be aware of how things present clinically for people from all different backgrounds. And it's for reasons like that why it's important to have a diverse pool of doctors, because sometimes, even unintentionally, we might not consider things because it just doesn't come to mind. But if you're coming from different backgrounds, you've got different insights, you know, different experiences, and that makes you more aware of different things. So it's really important that we have diversity in all industries, but especially medicine, for that reason, okay? Now, in terms of what we do, we provide a program for students which is part theory and part practical, and the program is designed to really give students a wholesome understanding of what it means to be a doctor. It's designed to equip students with the skills that they need to become a doctor, and we're in the process of having a 3-tier program. So far what we've been doing is delivering a program for year 8 and 9 students, but we believe in a continuous intervention that will support students from year 8 all the way up until their application to medical school. And I'm sure as many of you watching this will know, you know, there's different stages to the process of trying to get into medical school. There's interview skills, there's admissions exams, etc. So students really need to be supported along the whole journey, rather than just receiving, say, a 1-week program or a 1-day taster session. Even though they're valuable, I believe that to really have diversity, you need a long-term intervention. So that is what we're in the process of rolling out, and we actually received some funding quite recently which will help us to make this become a reality. So I'm excited for the future of the charity. The next slide's got some images of us in action. So here you can see some of the volunteers in the top left image. The top right shows us doing a ECG on one of the volunteers. So we like to allow students to really get practical so that they can really see and practice what they're learning, and for it to just all come together and make sense. And again, you can see some of our students at the bottom part of the screen getting involved. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think the word I'd use to describe what my journey as a junior doctor has been like is colourful. It's been challenging, it's been amazing, it's been challenging in lots of different ways. I won't go into too much detail now because I know I'm running short for time. But I've been loving it overall. I do not regret the decision to be a doctor. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to serve people, and the jump from medical school to being a doctor is big, but you are well supported, and as long as you ask questions and work together in your team, you'll be absolutely fine when you get to that stage. Next slide, please. In terms of my top tips, I'd say stay focused. For me, what that meant is having a vision board, something where I could clearly see what my vision was and always remind myself of it, because there will come things along your journey that may try to sidetrack you or distract you, and it's really important that you stay focused. Keep a journal or record of what you've done, just so that you can be mindful of your journey so far and anything else you need to do. And it's nice just to reflect and see your journey when you look back, so I definitely recommend that. And lastly, I'd say make sure you're passionate about it. Although being a doctor is wonderful, it can be challenging as well. So you really need to make sure that this is your passion, because if it's your passion, that will give you the strength to keep on persevering and getting through. Don't do medicine because you're pressured by your parents or family members or anything like that. And the final thing to say on the next slide is I got the opportunity to have a conversation with Sir John Major, the former Prime Minister, who was Prime Minister before you guys were born. And I asked him, Sir John, you know, you've had such a wealth of experience. What is one piece of advice you would give to me? And he said, Leanne, I would say never lose sight of your dreams, even when the distractions of work come, of children, of adult life. Do not lose sight of your dreams. So that is what I want to leave you all with today. And the final slide is just the social media handles for my charity and myself, if you want to stay connected. Thank you for listening.
I've just been so overwhelmed by Leanne's amazing presentation. It's making me want to reapply for medicine all over again just to get the Armitage Foundation's help. honestly, it's inspiring stuff. And what I want to sort of keep in mind is that both Leanne and Malone, you've heard from already, are just ordinary people who had ideas and saw them through and collaborated with other people to achieve things. Another person who is been stellar at achieving things is Dr. Vongai Mugadza. She's an NHS GP and founder of Experience Medicine, which is an organization formed to solve the problem of getting people access to medical work experience. You know, it aims to do this through innovative approaches, using virtual work experience opportunities and workshops and connecting students with medical institutions. Experience Medics was able to produce a well-received virtual work experience workshop that was really helpful in helping people get insight into medicine during the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's Vongai Mugadza. Muted. Muted.
Sorry, you're muted, Vongai.
Hi. There we go. Can everybody hear me now? Yes. So I've had a lot of problems with my technology this morning, but I'm just so happy that I'm here, and I'm happy that I've made it to speak to everyone. And thank you, Tinaye, for introducing me so lovely. Like Tinaye said, my name is Dr. Vongai, and I'm a GP based in London. I don't have a presentation today, but that's because I really just wanted to speak to you really from the heart, from an honest place about my experiences that I've gone through throughout my journey to becoming a doctor. I did found an organization called Experience Medicine last year, which has sort of changed in the way that it helps aspiring medics to get work experience over the last year, essentially. Initially, we were involved in a lot of things which we were trying to get people connected to practices. We were also trying to get people into courses and things like that. But ultimately, we've decided to focus on virtual work experience, which is something that's been so invaluable, particularly since the COVID-19 pandemic. New and existing technologies, really, such as video recordings and augmented reality, to produce resources that's going to allow aspiring medics to gain a holistic and realistic view of medicine, as well as provide materials to help you reflect during your medical school applications. Everybody knows really that medical work experience placements are normally organized through family connections, and aspiring medics who really live in remote or rural areas also struggle to obtain suitable placements. So we aim to remove those networking and geographical barriers that are posed by sort of traditional work experience. So today I'm going to tell you a bit more about my journey into medicine, which has been filled with different ups and downs. Enough even to create a reality show, really, that rivals the Kardashians. But I've got three main takeaways from my talk today that I'm hoping that resonate with you. The first being, you might not have it all figured out at first, and that is okay. The second being, challenge your inner voice and any perceived barriers that you might have. And the third being, all of the information that you need to succeed is literally at your fingertips. So I first moved to the UK at the age of 15. And as a first generation migrant from a single parent household, you would say that really the odds were stacked against me when it came to navigating the medical school application process. So I hope that, some of what I went through can help inspire you as well. I'll then finish off my talk by telling you a bit more about how life is now, giving you an idea of my work as a practicing GP. So when I first arrived to the UK, I lived in Hertfordshire and attended a state school where I was one of two Black girls in my entire year group. And despite the difficulties of, being a teenager, adjusting to a new life, adjusting to a new schooling system, and dealing with sort of developing my own personal identity, I did manage to excel in my GCSEs and A levels, and I owe this in part to sort of the determination as well as academic excellence really that had been instilled in me during my educational years in Zimbabwe. I do want to add at this point, really, like Leanne said previously, that medicine and being a doctor is really an academically challenging degree, and so working hard to achieve good grades is really important, if you want to be a doctor. So with GCSEs and A levels being relatively okay for me, the struggle really came for me when it was time to choosing what actual degree I wanted to do and what career path I was going to follow. I was really confused. I knew what I enjoyed. I knew I was good at science subjects, but actually also I enjoyed other humanities subjects such as sociology and history, which I actually studied both at AS level. And there's often this perception that if you want to study medicine, you have to only do science subjects, maths, science, biology, chemistry. But it's actually also important to remember that being a well-rounded and multifaceted individual and exploring your individual interests at this stage in your life is really important. Now more than ever, there's different opportunities in and outside of medicine for you to actually pivot. Like Leanne took a gap year, Malone went through clearing, some people come through after other degrees. So there's so many different pathways, and some of the interests that you may think may not really be conducive to medicine are actually things that can help you stand out from the crowd when you're coming to apply for your medical school applications. So don't be basically, this is all to say, don't be afraid to explore your other interests, even if it feels as though they're not necessarily conducive to medicine. So back to my confusion around my degree choice. So I was actually only able to attend one university open day, and that was organized by my school and was for my local university, which at the time was Hertfordshire University. And this was mainly due to my mother's work commitments. At the time, she was an A&E nurse. And I remember coming back home with a collection of prospectuses that ranged from pharmacy, dentistry, biomedical sciences. I was really confused. And it was only after a weekend I spent in A&E that was actually arranged by my mother did I finally settle on studying medicine. During my time, I really enjoyed the pace of the department. I had the opportunity to witness a chest drain insertion, which at the time was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen. And this was one of the reasons why I feel so strongly about, students having access to high quality work experience opportunities. And one of the reasons that prompted me to start up Experience Medicine. Observing work experience, obviously in the traditional sense, like I did, was a great way to be inspired and to help me make that decision to move forward with medicine. But I also realized that it's not the only way. And as technologies become more sophisticated, we hope to bring the same inspiration via virtual work experience. All that is to say that many people feel that, at this stage, if you're year 10, you should have it all figured out. You've known that you wanted to be a doctor since you were 5, and that's, you need to know everything. But actually, as you can see in my case, I didn't, and that's okay. And in time, with different experiences that you expose yourself to, it will all come together. And then the second point I wanted to make really that really affected my journey throughout medicine was about challenging your inner voice and any barriers that you think you may be facing. So, once you start doing this, it's actually surprising how many negative things that we tell ourselves that just aren't true. For me, finally deciding on a career path to study medicine was probably the easy part, and overcoming sort of my perceived barriers about what I could or couldn't do was one of the biggest hurdles. While I was actually doing my medical school applications, I didn't write the BMAT. So for those of you who may not be aware, the BMAT is an entrance exam that a select number of medical schools such as Oxford and Cambridge require you to take as part of your application process. And I didn't write it for two main reasons. So the first was that I didn't really want to be the only Black person at my school again after my experiences in secondary school. But also I didn't really believe that I was likely to be admitted to those schools, and I didn't really think I'd be able to cope with the perceived intensity of the degree course at those universities. And I mean, do I regret not writing the exam? No. I mean, it all worked out quite well for me because I ended up at a university that I really liked. But I realized how much I limited myself at the time, and I really don't want anyone who's thinking about studying medicine, or young people today, to feel or even do the same like I did. I do know that universities now have made sort of significant strides to be more inclusive, thanks in part to some of the work that organizations like the BMA are doing with their medical student discrimination charter. And there's a lot more talk about how particularly widening participation students can be better supported in these institutions once they start their courses, in order to maximize their achievements. And it's really easy once you enter this process, if you decide that you want to apply to medicine, and once you start engrossing yourself in all the admission statistics, how the competition ratios are, it can be very easy to be robbed of your confidence and your belief in yourself. And it might sound cliche, but if someone like me can do it, I think that every single one of you can too. And the next time you find yourself feeling that the task may be too big, or you're not good at a particular subject, I just want to encourage you to challenge that voice and actually challenge it and say, is that actually true? What I'm saying about myself, is that true? And try to reframe it. So for example, I always used to tell myself that I'm not good at writing. Writing is not my thing. And anyone who would ask me, I would say the same thing. And after a while of saying it, I found myself, starting to believe it, and I avoided writing altogether. And it wasn't until one day I actually just started to question it, to say, am I really not good at writing? And I actually started to challenge myself to do it, to do it a lot more. And through that, I started to become a lot better in my writing skills. And so it's just really to encourage you guys to always challenge that inner voice and any barrier that you might see that might be, in front of you at the time. And last but not least, the third lesson that I picked up from my experience is really about looking out for and using any information that's out there to help you with your journey. I mean, availability of information is something I feel has gone a long way in leveling the playing field for candidates from different backgrounds, because the secrets and tips for navigating the medical school application process is no longer confined to exclusive clicks. When I applied to medical school, I was the only medical school applicant in the entire year, and I was fully reliant on my school UCAS tutor, and never really understood the process or what each university I was applying for had to offer. For example, some schools have particular styles of teaching, such as problem-based learning. Some schools allow you to do an intercalated degree, which is essentially another additional degree as part of your course. I just feel that the medical school application process is just now a lot more transparent due to the internet. All of the information that you might need to get ahead is actually available on social media pages, on YouTube, or even on information sites like the Medical School Council website. All you have to do is to go looking for it and you will find it. So, another way that I found to make sure that you've got the right information and you're on the right track is to try and get some mentoring from someone who's recently, I'd probably emphasize recently, been through the process, because when I applied, the process is probably a lot more different to what it is now for particular universities. So I think it's really invaluable, and for me would have definitely made the application process a lot smoother. So I encourage you to go out there and find the information that you need. So where am I today? So, after the whole medical school application process, I managed to obtain a place at the University of Leicester Medical School, where I studied for 5 years. And following this, I moved to London, where I did 2 years of foundation training all around hospitals in South London and Kent. And I then took a year out of training where I spent my time really traveling. And then I came back to do my GP training in Chelsea and Westminster. So last year I finished my training and I returned to work in Southeast London, where I'm now working as a full-time GP. So maybe you're interested in knowing what it's like. I would say that the biggest adjustment for me when going from a trainee to becoming an independent GP was really the disconnect between the demographic makeup of my training area in Chelsea and Westminster to the patient population that I'm now looking after closer to home. So I don't have as many patients requesting private referrals, and I do encounter many more mental health and social problems that compound how I manage a patient's day-to-day medical conditions. But what I would say is that what I love most about my life as a GP is the variety of my day. I see everything from migraines to asthma to women's health in just one clinic. And I love to be able to not only manage a patient's medical problem, but also have the ability to understand people and how they think, how they behave, and how they speak. I think many people would call this the psychology of a consultation, and having a high level of communication skills to be able to manage different personalities and interact with people from different walks of life is something that I found particularly interesting. And I mean, alongside having strong communication skills and empathy, I find that the ability to manage risk and be decisive is also something key in my life as a GP, because I often have to manage patients alone based on my own history taking and examination skills with very limited investigations. And obviously all of this has also helped me in other aspects of my life. But obviously, because of the COVID-19 pandemic, our way of working has changed significantly, and we're trying to adjust to doing more telephone consultations, which carries additional risks for GPs, but definitely has a benefit of, somewhat reducing our workload and making appointments more accessible to certain demographics of people, people who are working and things of that nature. So, just to recap, the main points I just wanted to put across for you today, and I hope that you learn from, is just to be okay with not having it all figured out at this point. It will come, and challenge any negative inner voice that you may have, or any perceived barriers that you may have in the process of trying to become a doctor, and go out there and find the information that you need. I would encourage anyone today who has an interest in studying medicine but doesn't know where to start to access as many resources as you can online, to learn more about the career and whether it suits you, and have some conversations with people who have recently gone through the process. It's easier than you think, and many people are open to helping. And if you wanted to get any information about really good information sources, you can reach out to us on our Instagram page, which is Experience Medicine. So I hope this was helpful, guys.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. Mugadza. It was just so wonderful to hear all of the things that people have been saying today, and it's just been so inspiring. So what we're going to do next is we're going to move into the section where we talk about our different, we'll respond to the different questions that people have sent in already. So our first question that people have is how to prepare for entry exams. What advice? Free to any of the panelists to jump in.
I can. Ooh, yeah. So how to prepare for entry exams? When I was preparing so I prepared for both UK-CAT and BMAT. And for UK-CAT, there was a really good book. I think it was called 600 Questions or something like that. You can definitely find it on Amazon. And I found that really helpful, practicing under time conditions as well, and also using the online resources, because even though the book can help you practice under time conditions, the online resources are a bit more reflective of the format that the exam is done in, which is online. They say, often people say that you don't need to revise for these things, but I definitely found it very helpful to do practice. For BMAT, I also use different books. And personally, I also did one of those short courses, which dramatically changed my score, because I think on the first round of applications, the reason I got rejected from everywhere is because I didn't get any interviews. And I think that was because my UK CAT score wasn't high enough. But after doing a course and more vigorous preparation, I managed to bump it up.
Awesome. Awesome. So there's lots of resources that people are able to access, as well as pay for courses. There's lots of free courses that people run under one experience. So before you start chucking any money at any courses, find out if there's free support that you're able to access. I know UKCAT actually has stuff on their website and things like that, but getting yourself a book, all that kind of stuff will really help. Does anyone have what's their one tip for getting into medicine? Malone?
I would say my one tip would probably be similar to what Vongai was saying, that it's those things that you think are irrelevant, like your experiences that I don't know, if you play hockey or something, those are probably the things that will make you stand out, because at the end of the day, everybody is trying to get in with the same entry requirements, with the same grades, with the same UK CAT scores. But it's those extra things that you do on the outside which make you a well-rounded and an excellent individual.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any tips? I think there's a bit of a delay, so we're going to move on to our next question. So people were wondering about how do they reflect on work experience. I'm sure as experienced medics, you've all done lots and lots of reflection. So what would be your advice for people for reflecting about their work experience in personal statements?
I'm happy to answer this because I feel like I've answered this question quite a few times to a lot of people who ask. I would probably just try, there's quite a lot that goes into it, but I'll just want to break it down to maybe 3 important points that I would say. I think the first thing is to make sure that you have a reflective structure. There's so many different structures that are out there on how to reflect, because that is the most important part of what you're explaining. It's less so about what exactly you did, but it's more about what you learned from the experience. So if you can really have a handle on how to reflect appropriately on your experiences, that will give you a leg up. And the one that we recommend is the ACE structure, which you can have I think it's a bit long to explain, but you can have a look at on our Instagram page if you're interested. But learning just how to reflect on your experiences and making sure that you emphasize that when you talk about the experience during the work experience instead of the description of the event. Making sure that you prioritize your experiences, because a lot of the times you may have experienced so many different things, and it's important to pick out the ones that stood out the most to you, and that show any sort of development or movement in your thinking as a result of it. And I think one of the other things is just to also try and be balanced, meaning that if there's be honest. If there's things that you've noticed that you weren't expecting about medicine, it's important to highlight those and how that has made you feel, and how this has sort of developed your thinking around medicine. So I think those are sort of the key main things I would say to focus on.
I would just add to that, I think it's really important what was said about being honest, because sometimes, because students really want to get into medicine, they can just write personal statements which sometimes just make it out like everything's just perfect and great, when of course being a doctor has challenges, and you need to show that you've got a realistic understanding of the profession you're about to step into, and that you're willing to step into that knowing that. So I'd say, again, be honest and show a balanced statement. Agreed.
So following on from this, how was it about gaining work experience during the pandemic? Maybe Vongai, you're the one to go to for this one.
Yes, I think a lot of people were really stressed about their placements being cancelled, but for anyone who's applying this year and probably for the foreseeable future, medical schools understand that placements have been cancelled and that it's more difficult to gain work experience, and it's even I would look at it as a positive thing, because it really opens up the doors to a lot of people who maybe have had to email hundreds, 200 people just to get one particular placement, to be able to explore other avenues to meet the criteria. There's been so many great virtual work experience options that have been produced since the COVID-19 pandemic, namely, the Observe GP platform, that's been really, really good and can really give you an insight into medicine. So research and explore all of those different things, but also there are a lot of non-clinical things and placements that you can do that can provide you with transferable skills. So for example, even working in a shop, working in a hospital shop, even working in Primark, you work as part of a team, you show responsibility, and anything that you can do that can show sort of a crossover of transferable skills counts as well. So I think that, and among that, you've got things like podcasts, YouTube videos, anything that gives you an insight into medicine. And the good thing about it is that medical schools are now endorsing virtual work experience, and instead of saying that you need clinical experience, a lot of medical schools are now accepting relevant experience, which is any experience that sort of gives you either the skills and attributes, such as working in a shop, or that gives you an insight in medicine, such as Observe GP. So I think it's great, because it opens up doors a lot more for people.
Wonderful. That was a really good, really comprehensive answer, which I think is really important for people at this time. So sort of moving on to more questions about the actual business of studying medicine. Malone, if you could add one module or topic to the medical school curriculum, what would it be and why?
If I could add one module, it would definitely be around the work that I'm doing with Mind the Gap. So almost like a race-based medicine, because I think when you read a lot of the history of medicine and how we know some of the things that we know today, there's a lot of things which are often covered up, like we brush over it when it actually has a lot of importance. I think especially with Black History Month at the moment, there is a lot of different things which we actively practice in medicine if we look at where they came from. Hello.
Okay. I don't know where that noise is coming from. I hope it's not me. Okay. If we try and move on to the next question. Okay. So what is the split between theory and practical through the 5 to 6 years of training? I don't know if you want to pitch in, Leanne.
Sure. I think it varies somewhat. I don't know if I'm live yet. Yeah, I think it varies somewhat depending on the medical school that you go to. So some medical schools have a bit more of a traditional curriculum whereby you might not see a patient until the 3rd clinical year, whereas other medical schools, so for example at St. George's, you'll see a patient from the 1st year of medical school. I think we saw patients at least once a week. So it does vary between medical schools, I'd say, which is why it's really important that you research the type of medical schools that you're applying to, just so that you are aware of the curriculum. Because I know for me, I enjoy having that contact from the get-go. I would have found it quite boring if I didn't for the first 2 years or so. It just kind of reminds me of the vision. So I think it depends, yeah, on which medical school.
And so this is a really interesting question that someone has asked. Which factor in your studies do you think is the most important? Dedication and hard work, or intellectual ability? I don't know what you guys think of that one. It's a really good question.
I would say it's a balance between. It's a balance. I don't think it could be one or the other. Ooh. Sorry, I was just saying I think it's a balance. Of course, the reality is you need some level of intelligence as a doctor. You know, it's an academic subject and it requires a lot of hard work. So I don't think you can say that that's not important. It's very important. But dedication and hard work is just as important, because it's a marathon. It's not a sprint, you know, and it takes a lot to constantly I personally felt like I was just constantly having work to do throughout medical school, especially because of the extracurricular things I did. Even though they may sound cool and exciting, it did require that I really balanced my time. And even if you don't decide to co-found a charity, if you're doing other things in medical school, which I implore you to do, because it's really important to be well-rounded, you need to be good at time management, and you need to be dedicated. So I'd say both are important.
Mm-hmm. And Vongai, I want to ask you this next question, which I think is a really good question. So they're asking about, in terms of when you study things in medicine, do you also learn about the things that happen inside the body, at the cellular and chemical level? What's your response? What's your experience?
Yeah, yes, you do. I think we it really depends. It really depends into what detail. I think, doing biology and chemistry definitely gives you the grounding for that. And what I actually found in medical school is that there's a lot of repetition, and that's really important anyways, because to learn one concept and really be able to apply it takes a really long period of time, and you'll probably find that some of the stuff that you learn in your GCSEs and A levels of biology and chemistry, meaning sort of on a cellular level, will definitely be involved in the earlier part of your training, so that you get that basic understanding about how the body works on a cellular level, then more on a system level, and then obviously you also have to encapsulate that with the human interaction of it all. So you go through all of those processes. A lot of the sort of more cellular and system level things happen in the earlier part of your training for the most part, and then later on, when you have a firm grounding of that, you tend to then be introduced to more of the human interaction side of things. That's how it worked at my university, anyways.
No, I think that's quite a common experience, and again, this is why it's really important to look. Like, I think you're able to get like modules, well, they call them module breakdowns of what happens at every university. And that's also really good for personal statements and interviews, because it shows that you've actually gone away and found out what's actually happening at this particular university. We have a really good question, Malone. I don't know if you want to tackle this one. What is one characteristic that you think is required of being a good doctor?
I think, well, sorry, like my internet cut out last time. I think one of the best characteristics of being a good doctor is someone who can effectively communicate. I think it's one thing being intelligent and having all the information, but if you cannot transfer that information to somebody who doesn't understand, then essentially like that information that you have in your head is, in my eyes, void. And I think that's with everything in life, really. Like, the best communicators, no matter what you do, if you can communicate your ideas or communicate whatever's going on in your head, then you will be in a very good place.
Awesome. That's really good. There's lots of head nodding and shaking from our other participants as well as answering that. And I think this is the next question. I think is really important. And I think sort of a big part of why we're here. So one of the students asked, what was your experience like at medical school as one of the few Black students? And someone has also asked, have you faced discriminatory behavior from patients or colleagues based on your ethnicity? So just if any of you want to respond to either of those two questions.
I'll start because I'm still at medical school, so I can't speak from a doctor's perspective, but we have Dr. Leanne and Dr. Vongai in the building. I think at medical school, it was hard for me at the start because I used to look around and almost feel inferior to everyone else because my experience was almost my own experience and I couldn't share that experience with anybody else. However, I think, like we've mentioned before, from everyone speaking today, there is beauty in like your individuality. I used to look at everybody else and think, why am I not like them? Whereas when I started to own why am I like myself, things such as Mind the Gap were born, things such as increased confidence in my own ability were born. And you start to realize that at the end of the day, we're all going to be colleagues, we're all going to be doctors. As long as we can pass the exams, then yeah, we're all going to be doctors. So you don't necessarily have to be like somebody else to be a doctor. You just have to focus on yourself and keep that going. For the colleagues part, I will leave that to Leanne and Vongai.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm happy to go next. I think my experience, as I mentioned before, one of the main reasons that I chose to apply to certain universities was that fear of not being able to fit in and being, the only Black student at a school. I really didn't want that. And the university I ended up going to was the University of Leicester, which was really diverse. I think it's probably one of the most diverse universities. There were a lot of brown and Black people in my course. Not a lot of Black people, but a lot of brown people as well, and a lot of diversity. And it sort of made me feel quite comfortable. But I think that fear of not wanting to be in certain places where you can't really relate with other people, something that's so important, and that thankfully universities have started to pick up on and are starting to try and resolve, essentially. And as a doctor, like I said, I did my GP training in Chelsea and Westminster, but I live in Southeast London, so I would have that 2-hour trek to a completely different part of town, where there was a different patient demographic, and I think that I can't really remember particular incidences that would stick out to me, and I think part of it was just an internal feeling from myself, maybe not necessarily external, where I sort of felt like I somewhat didn't fit in, because after I was finishing dealing with these kind of patients, I was getting on the train and traveling 2 hours back to Southeast London. So but I think that is to say as well, to challenge some of those negative inner feelings of inferiority and not having confidence and things of that nature, because once you start to challenge them, you will find yourself sort of excelling in whatever environment that you're in.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm live yet. Yeah, here we go. I definitely agree with what both Vongai and Malone have said. I think that what I would add is definitely what Vongai said. I've definitely felt that inner feeling of being uncomfortable or feeling like I don't quite fit in here, etc. But similar to what Malone said in his presentation, it's so important that you're willing to step out of your comfort zone and to go into environments that make you feel a bit uncomfortable. And I know, looking at many hospitals, their board of directors and stuff, they're often not very diverse. You often see the same type of person, and for us to really make a change at a higher level so that it can have a widespread effect, we have to be willing sometimes to go into environments and places where we feel like the minority, understanding that, that emotion and that feeling will eventually go away if you keep putting yourself out there and keep on challenging that fear and doing that. And it's absolutely necessary for change to happen on a widespread scale.
Yeah, completely agree.
Wonderful responses there from everyone. I think, I'm not live yet.
I think it's stuck on me.
There we go. Those are wonderful responses there from everyone. I think what's really important, and I think I study medicine in Liverpool, and it's not as diverse as home in Birmingham, and I think that certainly can be challenging. But I look now, and then I look at the lower years of my medical school, and the representation has gotten so much better since then. At most medical schools, there are either BME medical societies or Black medical societies that people are a part of, and there's places to find community and also to expose yourself to really different backgrounds, and to really different experiences, because that's really valuable and that makes you a better and more sort of well-rounded medic. I think if we're going to end on this question, because I was slightly overrunning because I started a little bit late, and this is such a lovely question. They said, as aspiring medics, what can we do to support your work with improving accessibility to careers in medicine and diversity and representation in medical school? So already starting to change it before they've even got into medical school. So it's wonderful.
Awesome.
So yeah, it's open to any of you.
I would say, I don't think I'm live yet. I think it's stuck on Tinaye.
Yeah, it's transferring to Leanne in a second. You'll see Leanne speaking in a second.
Here we go. Yeah, so in terms of the Armitage Foundation, go to our website and there's a contact form. You can definitely sign up to be volunteers for when you do get into medical school. So that would be great. Or even in a few years' time when you're at medical school, if you want to be a volunteer, let us know so you can contact us in that way. So that's what I would say for my foundation if you want to support in that way.
Yeah, so I would, yeah.
I don't like it, Vongai.
Oh yes, it's on me now. Yeah, so you know, from experience medicine's point of view, virtual work experience is a relatively new area, and I think from our point of view, it's really the engagement from people who are interested in medicine, as well as their feedback, and really help in producing sort of these resources as we go along. I think it'll be something that is really, really important, because like I said, we're really at the early stages of trying to develop resources that are going to be extremely helpful, and any sort of input that you can have in that way by engaging and following us on social media, so that you can engage with all of the questions that we ask around how we sort of produce some of these resources will be really helpful. What I would also say is that you know, people have, when you're going through the application process, you might come across information that you found to be really helpful that maybe another person may not know. And I think if you really want to be helpful in that sense, is just sharing any information that you have. A lot of people feel that, particularly if they're going into a very competitive degree course, they have to hold their cards close to their chest. But I would just, you know, advise you to sort of, you know, share with as many people as you can who can also benefit from some of the information that you've gained.
And I think on my respect with Mind the Gap, we have a dedicated Instagram platform to a lot of the work that I'm doing with Mind the Gap, called @BlackandBrownSkin, or even just following my personal accounts on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. I think sometimes when we talk about inspiration and representation, it doesn't always necessarily have to come from, oh, he does medicine. Maybe we have similar interests and you can almost envision yourself in me. And I think that when I look at other people who are older than me, or sometimes even younger than me, where I can envision myself in them, is always so positive and amazing to see. And yeah, I think one thing that's so important when you eventually get to medical school is to keep raising the agenda where possible surrounding Mind the Gap. If you think your lecture content is not diverse or it's not entirely representative of the patient population that you're going to serve, I encourage you and hope to empower you to be able to speak out about it, because clearly there is room for change and there's always room for change. So don't feel like you don't have the right to speak out about what you think is an issue.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. It's just been really wonderful to meet you all virtually and to share in everything together. So what I'd really encourage you is to follow Malone, Leanne, and Vongai all on their social medias and interact with them, find out about the work that they do and how they can get involved. Hopefully we'll be distributing. I'm gonna push our lovely social media team about all the exciting and useful organizations that we've been talking about today that can help you on your journey into medicine. So thank you so much for listening, and I hope this has been a great morning. Also want to say a big thank you to everyone at the BMA who's helped organize this event. So thank you to Dr. Helena McKeon, our representative body chair. Thank you to everyone in Secretariat and the comms team for organizing this. And thank you to our wonderful speakers, Malone Mukwende, Dr. Leanne Armitage, and Dr. Vongai Mugadza, for being just wonderful, inspiring people. Thank you so much.
Thank you
for having us.